Welcome to Time of Death. This video is for informational purposes and in no way meant to glorify or condone violence. In today's video, we'll be discussing the murders of Quayshawn Clarence Irving, who was shot and killed in the 14,000 block of Atlantic Avenue in East Compton, and Corey Dante Ferguson, who was shot and killed in the 14,000 block of Harris Avenue in East Compton, according to LA County coroner records. David Paul Guerrero and Ricardo Bañuelos Vena were subsequently arrested and charged with the murder. The following is the evidence at trial. Defendants Guerrero and Vena were tried for murders that stem from a long-running gang rivalry in the city of Compton. Defendants Guerrero and Vena are members of the Compton Varrio 70s, otherwise known as CV70, a primarily Hispanic street gang in East Compton with approximately 100 active members. CV70 is made up of various cliques, including Chicos, the clique to which both defendants belong. Defendant Guerrero's gang moniker is Evil, and defendant Vena is known as Frisk. CV70 is not allied with any other gang. Graffiti and tattoos related to the gang often include the letters EBK, meaning Everybody Killer. Their main rivals are the Eastside Piru gangs, which are predominantly African American street gangs. Among the Piru gangs in the East Compton area are Lime Hood Piru, Looters Park Piru, and Natural Born Players, or MBP. MBP is a small clique made up mostly of members of the extended Ferguson family, including one of the murder victims in this case, Corey Ferguson. Since the early 2000s, the Chicos clique of CV70 has been feuding with the Eastside Piru gangs, primarily MBP. In 2001, Ricky Jimenez was shot and killed. Ricky was the sister of Antonio Jimenez, another longtime member of the Chicos clique known as Tone. MBP was blamed for her death. On October 23, 2004, Quayshawn Irving, a Lime Hood Piru gang member and one of the murder victims in this case, was shot and killed near the intersection of Atlantic and St. Louis Street in the area claimed by both CV70 and the Piru gangs. On October 23, 2004, Juan was at work at an automotive shop near the intersection of Atlantic and St. Louis Street in the city of Compton. Sometime shortly before 5 p.m., Juan saw a dark blue sedan stopped at the intersection. The driver was pointing a gun, so Juan dug down just as the sedan started to make a right turn from San Luis onto Atlantic. Juan then heard 5 or 6 gunshots in rapid succession. After a few moments, Juan got up and saw a man lying on the sidewalk bleeding. There was a bike lying nearby. About 4:30 p.m., Deputy Joseph Sumner was outside of a home on Atlantic just south of San Vicente, where he and his partner, Deputy Choi, had responded to an unrelated call. Deputy Sumner heard several gunshots that sounded close by, within 100 to 150 yards. He and Deputy Choi looked down the street in the direction of the gunshots and saw several cars in the street and people scattering. They got into their patrol car and headed toward the scene. Deputy Sumner saw people pointing in the direction of a car turning from Atlantic onto San Vicente. It was a dark color, probably black Lexus. Deputy Sumner turned on San Vicente and pursued the Lexus, but eventually lost sight of it. He and Deputy Choi continued to drive down San Vicente for several blocks, searching for the car to no avail. They then returned to the scene after they received a radio call of a gunshot victim at that location. Homicide Detective William Marsh arrived at the scene and spoke with Deputy Sumner and Choi. In walking the scene, 2 medium caliber copper jacketed bullets were collected. No cartridge casings were found. 2 additional medium caliber bullets were recovered during the autopsy of victim Quayshawn Irving. The coroner identified the cause of Irving's death to be multiple gunshot wounds. Irving had suffered 6 gunshot wounds in the attack, with 1 shot in the upper right back likely being the fatal shot. By January 2006, the Irving murder remained unsolved. Detective Peter Hatch, who had been working a general gang detail in Compton, was assigned to a special task force that had been formed by the LA County Sheriff's Department specifically to target the CV70 gang and to stop the explosion of shootings and murders that were occurring in the East Rancho Dominguez area of Compton at the time. In May 2006, while investigating the shooting death of Melvin Walker, Detective Hatch went to speak with some of Walker's family members who lived in Lime Hood Piru territory. One of them told him that a witness who lived across the street might have information about the 2004 murder of victim Quayshawn Irving. Detective Hatch crossed the street and spoke with the witness who was outside on his porch. The witness told him that on October 23, 2004, he was outside in his front yard getting ready to have a barbecue. He saw victim Quayshawn Irving and DeJuan leave to go to the store. The victim was riding a bike and DeJuan was walking alongside of him. A few minutes after they left, he saw a dark-colored Lexus drive fast down San Vicente and nearly hit Melvin Walker as he was coming across the street to the witness's house. The witness said the driver was defendant Guerrero, whom he knew as Evil. Shortly thereafter, a black and white patrol car drove by. A couple of months later, Detective Hedge returned to the witness's house to show him a six-pack photographic lineup with defendant Guerrero's photograph in the number 5 spot. The witness was cooperative and agreed to view the six-pack. He looked at it and pointed at defendant Guerrero's picture and said, "That's Evil." He told Detective Hedge he had known defendant Guerrero for years, as they had lived a couple of blocks from one another when they were younger. The witness circled the photograph, wrote his initials next to the picture, and then wrote, "Evil was being chased by the police the day Quayshawn Irving was killed." Detectives Hedge and Marsh lost track of the witness for the next several years. They were able to locate him for a preliminary hearing on the Irving murder in 2015. However, by that time, the witness recanted his prior statements about what he saw the day the victim was killed. When Detective Marsh drove the witness back home after the hearing, he asked why he recanted, and the victim said, "You don't gotta live here." On August 18, 2012, Corey Ferguson, the other murder victim in this case, was shot and killed in the front yard of his family home in Compton. On the evening of August 18, 2012, Miss P went to visit family in Compton, arriving at the Ferguson family home around 5 p.m. The family gathering included Miss P and several others. Miss P's nephew, victim Corey Ferguson, was in the front yard talking on his phone. Miss P and a few others started up a game of dominoes in the garage. The garage door was open to the driveway and the front yard. At some point, Miss P heard several loud noises that she initially thought were firecrackers. There was a pause, then 3 more quick shots and the sound of someone running. Miss P remembered that Corey, the victim, was out front. She looked out toward the front yard for him and saw someone on the ground. A Hispanic man wearing a white t-shirt and black baseball cap, holding a gun, walked up, pointed his gun down at the person on the ground, and shot a couple more times. The shooter then ran out of the yard. Miss P then realized it was the victim laying on the ground. Detective Dominic Regia arrived at the Ferguson home sometime after 8 p.m. No shell casings were recovered near the body, leading Detective Regia to suspect a revolver was used in the shooting. Detective Regia saw gunshot wounds to the victim's torso and head. It was later determined by autopsy that the victim died from multiple gunshot wounds, including 2 fatal close-range shots to the head, 2 shots to the torso, and a graze wound to the left wrist. 4 bullet or bullet fragments were recovered and forwarded to the crime lab for testing. Miss P spoke with Detective Regia when he arrived on the scene and gave him a description of the shooter. She said he appeared to be 5 feet 9 inches tall and had a medium build. She did not recall any tattoos on his arms, but had been focusing on his face. Miss P was interviewed again a short time later by Detective Regia and shown a six-pack. She identified defendant Vena as the shooter. In November 2012, Antonio Jimenez, aka Tone, was driving around in Chico's territory with defendant Vena. They stopped periodically so Vena could paint graffiti. At one location, a patrol car pulled up. Antonio and defendant Vena fled, leading the deputies on a high-speed chase. They eventually eluded the deputies and abandoned the vehicle. From the abandoned vehicle, the deputies were able to identify the registered owner and arrested Antonio a couple of days later. While in custody, Antonio asked to speak to Detective Sumner. Detective Sumner knew Antonio from years working the gang detail and knew he was an active member of CV-70. Antonio told Detective Sumner he had information about the Ferguson murder. Detective Sumner arranged for Detective Regia and Shipe to speak with Antonio. Antonio told detectives that defendant Vena had been bragging about the Ferguson murder and that he used a .357 revolver. Antonio agreed to become an informant for the sheriff's department. Antonio explained he had been a member of the Chico's clique of CV-70 for over a decade. He was known as Tone, but some rival African-American gang members referred to him as White Boy because he was light-skinned. Antonio said that in August of 2012, just after defendant Vena had been released from prison, he went to Vena's house for a small party celebrating his release. Antonio went with another CV-70 gang member named Osito. At some point during the party, defendant Vena approached Antonio and Osito and started talking about how the Fergusons gotta go. Antonio understood defendant Vena to be referring to the members of the Ferguson family that had testified against defendant Guerrero in the Darrell White murder trial. While they were talking, Defendant Vena showed Antonio a kite he had received from defendant Guerrero. The kite contained a list of names, 3 of which were Ferguson family members, victim Corey, Dewan, and Brandon. When Vena saw the list, he knew it meant there would be a whole bunch of killing. Antonio heard that several days later, victim Corey Ferguson was shot and killed. Not long after, defendant Vena came over to Antonio's house and told him that he had approached Ferguson at his home, pretending that he was going to buy marijuana. Defendant Vena said he then shot him in the back and in the head with a .357 revolver. Defendant Vena was grinning when he said it, like he was proud of what he did. Antonio said his agreement to cooperate included pleading to the 2012 felony evasion charge, for which he served time in jail and was placed on 3 years probation. He also received relocation assistance. Detective Sumner testified as the prosecution's gang expert. He discussed gang culture generally and explained that snitching, whether cooperating with law enforcement or testifying in court, is not tolerated. Gangs expect to exact justice in the streets, not in the criminal justice system. Based on prior contacts with them and their numerous tattoos, Detective Sumner stated his opinion that both defendants Vena and Guerrero were active CV-70 gang members. Neither defendant contested their gang membership at trial. Following the trial, the jury found both defendants guilty of the first-degree murder of Corey Ferguson. The jury also found defendant Guerrero guilty of the first-degree murder of Quayshawn Irvin and found true all 3 special circumstance allegations. The court sentenced defendant Guerrero as follows: for the Ferguson murder, life without the possibility of parole, plus a consecutive term of 25 years to life for the firearm enhancement. And for the Irving murder, life without the possibility of parole, plus a consecutive term of 25 years to life for the firearm enhancement. The court sentenced defendant Vena as follows: for the Ferguson murder, life without the possibility of parole, plus a consecutive term of 25 years to life for the firearm enhancement. Quayshawn Clarence Irving was 17 years old at the time of death. Corey Dante Ferguson was 28 years old at the time of death.